Back here again, 14 months on. Back at the end of April, you might remember that Bec Thomas came into the studio. Bec Thomas is the independent MLC for Elwick in the state's upper house, former mayor of Glenorchy. She came in and talked about her concerns about the rising rates of youth crime in the area. Whole supermarkets at the time being forced into lockdown. Some big retailers for brief periods of time were effectively being taken over by groups of youths. So what's happened since? And how much of the conversation about youth crime and the reasons why young people make poor choices is or should be, for you, part of what's discussed in this state election campaign? Bec Thomas would like to see it on the agenda. Independent MLC for Elwick. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Leon.
Well, 3 weeks ago, you wrote to the Premier outlining a 10-point plan to address the issue. Have you had a response?
I have not yet had a response. Clearly the government's been a little bit distracted with the instability in the House of Assembly and now the election, which is really disappointing, Leon, because whilst, they fight over leadership, people on the ground in the community, their life goes on and they continue to be affected by decisions or inaction of government.
It's not a new issue, but when you came in about 3 Mondays back and brought it to our attention again on mornings, it felt like a lot happened in the days since. There were public meetings, there was a higher police presence, we heard from more retailers about their concerns as well as local residents. Have things got better?
Absolutely, Leon. Pleasingly, Tasmania Police responded really swiftly to the surge that we saw in youth crime, and whilst it wasn't necessarily increase in youth crime statistics in the number, it was really the violence, the level of violence associated with the surge in youth crime that we saw that was really concerning people in the community, and rightly so, because people have a right to feel safe in our community, and one of the fundamental responsibilities of government is to ensure public safety and to maintain order. And without this, trust in government and community wellbeing quickly erodes. So I was really pleased that Tasmania Police, Glenorchy Police, Inspector Klug and his team responded with a task force, and certainly the response from retailers and the community there has been increased police patrols, and people have felt safer as a result, and the number of incidents have appeared to have decreased.
On Mornings Around Tasmania, Bec Thomas is our guest this morning. Bec Thomas, we had the Children's Commissioner on Mornings on Friday and asked the question, another election, months of uncertainty, no parliament, paralysis in parts of the public service, how concerned she was about the ability to implement the complex policy responses to the Commission of Inquiry and the government's youth justice blueprint, which may well help address some of the issues you're raised. How worried are you about the lost time and potentially lost momentum in implementing these reforms?
Yeah, I'm deeply concerned about that. I heard the Commissioner on your show and certainly take on board and agree with a lot of what she said in the distraction that an election creates and the impact it has on slowing down action, which has already been too slow, Leon. So certainly it is concerning, and I'm calling on those contesting this election to put forward serious evidence-based plans to address these very real concerns about youth offending that our communities are facing every day. Because what we tend to hear and what we heard in the face of the recent surge in the violent youth crime I was referring to, we heard the Liberal government come out defaulting to their punitive adult time for adult crime stance. We heard the Greens leaning towards overly idealistic responses that overlook community safety to a degree, and Labor offering little clarity or direction at all. And what we really need to do is have a mature, evidence-based conversation to find a balanced path forward that supports rehabilitation but also protects the public and meets community expectations.
But is that path not in the Youth Justice Blueprint? I mean, it's designed to talk to and help support people that are coming into contact with the criminal justice system, who are breaking the law in many cases, support them to make better choices and to take a different path. I mean, is what you want to hear just an endorsement of that approach, or do you think that approach doesn't go far enough or in the right direction?
I'm 100% behind the Youth Justice Blueprint, but what the issue is the government is not investing enough in the early intervention and prevention actions or strategies included in that youth justice blueprint. So, until it invests in the early intervention side of things, we are going to see generations continue through these same cycles. The government must invest in breaking the cycle of disadvantage and crime if we are to stop future generations from being impacted by these same issues. And that's what we need to see a commitment to by all of the major parties through this election. Also, though, people need to be safe in our communities, and some of the things I've included in my 10-point plan involve some suggestions for legislative change to ensure that whilst we play that catch-up and implement the early intervention programs, there are consequences for behaviour. Because what people are telling me is that the current judicial outcomes and the current responses to violent crime aren't acceptable and aren't meeting community expectations and standards. So we need a review of our youth bail laws and the issues under the Youth Justice Act that mean breaching bail is not an offence. So that that's a factor contributing to recidivism, and this is where we need to have a mature conversation to get that balance right. It's not about the extremes, and that's where we tend to default in these conversations, is at the extreme ends of the argument, and then we end up getting nowhere. So we need to have a grown-up conversation to find the balance that strikes the right balance between supporting young offenders and also ensuring public safety.
I'll get you to respond directly to Glenn. He's just texted. You're on 936 ABC Radio Hobart. ABC Northern Tasmania. Bec Thomas is our guest, independent MLC for Elwick, which, if you don't know, sort of in the greater Glenorchy area, former mayor of Glenorchy. Bec Thomas, I'll read you Glenn's text. I'll be able to find others if I look through the sort of running number of texts coming in. Complex policy issue, ? The solution is jail. Simple, these youths cannot commit these crimes behind bars, says Glenn this morning. He's not alone in holding that view. What do you say to Glenn, Bec Thomas?
Look, I think, certainly that goes to the extreme end of the argument. And of course, there are around the world other examples of doing things differently, and that's what we need to be looking at. I agree that there needs to be consequences for behaviour in order to ensure our community is safe. But what the evidence suggests is that locking young people up behind bars doesn't, they don't come out necessarily better people most of the time. They don't come out rehabilitated. So how can we do things differently to change the trajectory for these young people? That is what we need to be looking at and have that mature conversation about, rather than going to these extremes of either, we just keep releasing them back out and hope that the community supports will be there, or we lock them up and throw them behind bars with adult sort of conditions, So we know that's not working. Let's look at doing things differently. We also know that just having them out on the street and reoffending is not working. So what we're doing is not working. There's got to be a better solution.
You're on Mornings Around Tasmania. Bec Thomas is our guest, independent MLC for Elwick. Bec Thomas, about a month ago now, you sat here just outside the door that I'm behind right now, and we talked about the planned AFL stadium for Macquarie Point. A simple question. Do you understand Labor's position on the stadium at Macquarie Point?
I have heard this morning that, of course I understand that they are for a stadium. I have heard this morning that they are reconsidering whether they would support enabling legislation, so I'm not 100% across it, but my reading into it is they're looking at whether I was thinking maybe they're looking at going back to the POS process. So I don't know. It's all a bit moving feast, isn't it, Leon?
It's an interesting time. Bec Thomas, appreciate you talking with us this morning.
Thank you.